Let's rewind to the early 1800s. The airplane was invented by the Wright brothers, and Jay and Lewis started working on the world's first lithium batteries. None of us were obviously alive, but there were leaders out there, innovators with visions that stretched years ahead, geniuses with perceptions that foresaw the future with crystal-like clarity. Our whole foundation today is built on accomplishments. Men and women who sought to enrich our minds and strive to make our lives better. Men and women who dedicated their days and nights to come up with creations and inventions that would define who we are today. And now, we are building upon them, following their footsteps and replicating the way of thinking, creating new technologies and endless solutions to solve immense problems in the world. Or are we? Has the world really changed since the last industrial revolution? Well, of course it has. But change is the tricky part. I was born in 1998, and I grew up knowing a world with technology and internet. My older siblings, cousins, and millions of people born before me had to wait longer for this world to arrive. And when it arrived, it made them curious, excited, and maybe a bit cautious about how their world will be different. And since I grew up with all these things already established, myself and this entire millennial generation missed that boat of curiosity that passed by. So you see, when the things we have at our disposal come easy, like Netflix, the GPS, the internet, or cars, it becomes easy for us to lose curiosity about how they're built in the first place. There's a great quote by a science fiction author called Arthur Clarke. He says, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." You can take this quote to mean a lot of things, but basically, if you don't know how something is built or the mechanisms behind it that make it work, it might be as well science fiction. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing necessarily bad about that. An average consumer isn't expected to know how Suits or Breaking Bad zapped its way across the internet to get to his laptop screens, but there is a slippery slope. When conveniences are given to us, it can be easy to lose this entire sense of curiosity that we once had and owned. Take the most basic example. The mystery of a forest loses its appeal when a map is given to us. I personally love Google Maps, but I think it kind of spoils this experience and fun of getting lost. And when I say getting lost, there's always someone in the car that will say, "Dude, just turn on the GPS you have in your car. We don't know where we're going. This is bad." And to that, I'm going to tell this dude, and I'm going to tell all of you, no. Be curious, be bold enough to fail, and be bold enough to make these mistakes. My name is Stefano Fallaha. I'm a 19-year-old student entrepreneur based in Beirut, Lebanon. And I founded a startup called Fallound, a platform which ultimately strives to spark curiosity and unconsciously expand mindsets for the better. I used to be a kid who dreamt a lot. I got this room in the house with the ocean view and the boulevard along with it. And with my desk planted firmly in front of this view, I would spend my days looking out the window and contemplating anything that passed by, from birds to cars to ships to planes. I used to think and envision how things would be this way, or that way, or the other way around. And when my mom passed by, I'd immediately look down to the same page I've been studying on for the past hour. And then one day, I had this idea of building a voice-based social network. A network that would keep people occupied and interested when they have absolutely no access to visuals. Whether they're running or working out on this boulevard, or driving in their cars for the daily commute. And so I started Fallound as a Twitter for audio. You follow topics and channels, and you would share audio recordings in regards to these specific topics and channels. And so my journey of translating this idea into reality began. And let me tell you, The failures were spectacular. First of all, I tried to teach myself how to code. I spent months locked up in my bedroom and banging my head against the laptop. I tried to code the app from scratch. No luck. I downloaded some templates off the internet, but I couldn't edit them properly. I then tried to reverse engineer some of my competitors' technologies, but again, crashed and burned. When everything was becoming too difficult to do and to handle by myself, I admitted my shortcomings and partnered with a developer whose skills complemented mine. Things were moving forward and initial versions were being released and tested by users, but as time passed, things began to fall apart. We didn't see eye to eye on the direction of the startup, and even though we planned to launch the app to the public, we ultimately parted ways and I had to put things on hold. And this is when I decided to outsource and freelance the work to a development house in India. Communication was tough, but the product they built was pretty decent. But there was one problem. One single problem that made all the difference. No one was using it. And what's a product with absolutely no customers? So you see, I failed spectacularly on all measures. I spent over a year trying to build a product that proved to be useless. I lost a substantial amount of money, and I lost some of my motivation. But I picked myself back up, and here I am standing before you now. But it's important to pause and acknowledge that failures can be frustrating. After a lot of reflection and thinking, I realized that rather than shift gears and refine my curiosity, I was doing the exact same thing I didn't want to do. I was zooming in too closely on a problem that I wanted to solve. This tunnel vision set in, and so I completely lost sight of the big picture I had in mind. At the time, I had two choices. One, give up and consider the venture a failure, or two, back up, get some perspective, and approach the startup in a totally different way. And so I went with option two. Despite my failures and pitfalls I had throughout my journey so far, this idea of recreating the startup was extremely appealing to me. It made things a bit more mysterious, and all of a sudden, it became fun again. I started pitching my new concept to random people, getting some feedback, attending conferences, networking events, and I was really bent on building and improving my communication and business skills. As for the startup itself, I went back to the drawing boards and tossed this whole social network idea in the trash. As much as it excited me, I really had to fall out of love of what wasn't working to get closer to something that was. It was daunting, I confess, but these blank canvases can be extremely refreshing, trust me. Long story short, I pivoted from a failing social network to a podcast aggregator that will serve the FIFA World Cup's audience of billions in 2022 and beyond. The software for cars and app safely compiles and summarizes audio content based on your interests so that you can enjoy seamless for your commute. So notice this end goal of education on the go stayed the same, but the approach was different. Now, the point of all of this isn't to talk to you about my startup. Yes, I'm proud of it. I'm confident in it. I even believe it will invite you to become curious again by potentially introducing you to content you've never known existed before. But most importantly, my journey of failure has led me to you today. This journey has taught me that even though I made what some might call wrong turns along the way, it was these failures that helped me rediscover my curiosity. And it's that very lesson that I strive to infuse into the core vision of my startup, helping me learn and think more expansively. Now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the word familiarity. A lot of us tend to like what's familiar. It's cute, it's nice, it's cozy. But this specific familiarity the downside of curiosity. A fixed mindset assumes that your intelligence, your character, your creative ability are static. They're fixed, they don't move. It can lead us to this tunnel vision, one that leads us to focus on what nail we can hammer, as opposed to asking the question, what if we didn't have nails or a hammer? Now, on the other hand, a growth mindset thrives on feedback, creativity, curiosity, mystery. These failures not as evidence of errors or mistakes, but as a platform for improvement and growth. It isn't important to have an amazing idea from the start. It is important to remember that no idea comes out fully formed. Another writer, Anne Lamott, once talked about the importance of the shitty first draft. My interpretation of this is that people can be their own worst enemies, questioning themselves and getting too wrapped up in this task and forgetting to just throw themselves into the blank canvas. I know it's easy for me to tell you, never lose your drive and ambition to reach your goal. And today, I don't want you to think that I'm this 19-year-old kid from Lebanon who's got it all figured out. It's tempting to think that someday in 5, 10, 20, 25 years from now, I'll have reached a point of expertise to where I feel like I have all the answers. You know, I think society sets us up this way. Go to school, earn your degrees, become a pro and reach the top. And once you reach this proverbial top that doesn't even exist, this is when you can relax on the beach and call yourself an expert. But I invite you all today to consider that no matter how much we grow from the experiences we gain along the years, this perimeter of ignorance also expands and grows with us. So no matter how much you think you know the world around you, think about how it might be a little different. Think about how you might make it that way. And if an idea fails, embrace the fruits of failure. Remember the power of the pivot, and always remain curious. Thank you.